So you're going to draw a column, a few columns. So the first column is, that's the point, the particular point that I'm going to be sharing with you. Then the second column is bullet point notes, bullet format notes. Here you're going to rate yourself 1 to 10, where I am now on that, where I am now, where I would measure myself, and the other column is where I want to be out of 10. But as a psychologist, I need to share this with you. The moment you rate yourself 9 or 10, you are in self-delusion. So I'm sharing that with you right up front. Self-delusion means I'm lying to myself. Okay, I'm bluffing myself. It's the ego that's in action. So, noise in my head bother you there for a moment? I wrote there, they missed it, carry on, they will wake up and laugh at your jokes later. Okay, so when you are, so here you will rate yourself, so whatever point I share, you'll take notes on it, just some short notes as you capture them. Then at the end, you rate yourself. You're going, well, I'm about a 5 at this, or a 6 at this. And then where can I be? I want to suggest that you add 1 to that number. So if you rated yourself as a 5, I want to encourage you to rate yourself as a 6. If you're going to set goals, set reachable goals. Don't go and jump from a 2 here to a 6. A jump of 4 is extremely large for personal growth. You really have to be magnificent to be able to make that jump. All right. So that's where I am at with you today. So I would appreciate if you would open your Bibles to the book of Acts. And I'm going to be sharing with you from chapter 27 to 28. And I'm going to be telling you the story up front, so I'm going to save you the time of reading it. And then I would appreciate us to look at a leader. So in coaching, here's what I've learned. Behavior speaks louder than words. Behavior speaks louder than words. You can tell me anything that you want. If it doesn't come out in behavior, then it's nothing. Then it's still a dream or an imagination. So behavior is the giveaway. You'll remember the story where a prophet comes into a king's throne room, and the command given to him was that he had to kill the nation, he had to kill people, he had to kill cattle, and he had to kill sheep. And when the prophet walks into the throne room, he asks the king, did you do what God commanded? Yes, I did what God commanded. Then the prophet asks, I hear the bleating of sheep. Oops. He didn't kill them all. He brought some home for breyvleis. Giveaway. Your words can say, I value my family. Then as a coach, I'm going to ask you to open up 2 books. Number 1, open up your budget. Show me in your budget, besides food and shelter, where you are spending money on your family. If you can't show me there, your behavior tells me something different. The other thing is open up your diary, and if I cannot see in your diary where you make time to be with your children, to be with your parents, The most important thing I watch when I coach people, the first thing I look around in the office for or on the desk is, where's your diary? Where's your calendar? So the first thing you go and buy today is one of those calendars with little blocks in so that you can put it on a fridge, because in creation, when the Creator blew Ruach onto the chaos, He brought order. Those are the lines and the days and the dates. You need to bring order in your life if you're going to go anywhere at any time. Without order, there will always be chaos. So bring that into your daily lifestyle. Young people, take a calendar, put it up there. I'm going to write an exam on the 13th. That means I need to start to study here around about on the 1st, not on the 12th. And then pray and say, please, God, help me through this. Okay? Then they say, oh, would the Lord please help me? Remember, you can only remember what you've put in. To look at leadership, and there are many, many people that have spoken on leadership, and there are thousands of books on the subject of leadership. And sadly, we live in a world where everybody thinks that they're a leader, which is not the case. They might be exceptional managers, but they are not leaders. The main difference between a leader and a manager is that a leader owns the vision. And in my coaching organization called VIP Leadership, which is structured on two biblical principles. The first biblical principle is where Jacob comes to his son Joseph and he says to him, you tell me about the dream that's in your heart. Because the way that you're explaining it to your brothers is going to be a bit of a bloodbath. And the second principle is based on the tribe of Issachar in 2 Chronicles, who were 200 men and women who knew the times and seasons. They were strategists. They were entrepreneurs. And they were the ones who advised King David in all his war strategies. VIP stands for visionary, innovative, pioneer. And that's the basic definition of a leader. A person who's a visionary, they've got the vision, they own it, they are innovative, they're incisive, they are intentional, they are influential, and they are inspirational. And then P stands for pioneer, passion, and purpose. Those are the basic criteria of any leader of leaders. And that's where my main attention is in my coaching. I used to be in the ministry. That's when I used to like people. But so here's the story. Acts chapter 27 is the story of Paul. He's a biblical rabbi, and he's also a legal rabbi. So he's a rabbi that belongs to the Sanhedrin. So he's not a preaching, teaching rabbi in a synagogue. He is a legal attorney rabbi who happened to be a rabbi. We know his story. He was the first one to see the he had a vision and a transfiguration, and he saw Christ, and he had a dramatic turnaround in his life. And instead of persecuting people, he then started spreading the gospel. Because behavior is a giveaway, my times when I ask questions to the Father and I say, please show me. So when he says, I want you to be righteous, I'm going, unpack that word for me. Show me what it means. Show me somewhere where I can see it in action. And in Acts chapter 27 and 28, we catch a man who is a magnificent leader. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. And it's interesting that the Gospel of Luke has more words written than the epistles that Paul wrote. So Luke is the longest gospel written by a doctor. And so when they say Paul wrote most, it was in chapters and volumes, but it wasn't in the amount of words. If you go and check the amount of words in Luke, they're far more than the epistles that Paul wrote. So we catch this man in action. We watch a leader in action. And the best time to catch anyone, to see their real essence of their being, is in a crisis. Have you noticed? Say amen. So when a person is really in the thick of things, when there is trouble at the house and you watch mom and dad, you are watching the true essence of the person in action. Oops. Just turn to the person next to you and say, he's talking to you, not to me. So you catch a person in their true essence when the pawpaw hits the fan, and it's not like here in South Africa where there's load shedding, the fan is on. And there is pawpaw everywhere. How that person reacts in that moment, that's where you see the true essence of a person. It's like a tea bag. If you put the tea bag in hot water, if you don't have hot water, you don't have tea. And you can put the tea bag in cold water. It takes a long time, but it just doesn't take out all the flavor. Hot water takes out the flavor. Turn to the person next to you and say, I hope it doesn't get hot in here. So in chapter 27, we find this man. He's now been taken prisoner and he's on his way to Rome. So he's a Jew in the Sanhedrin, but he's also a citizen of Rome. So he belongs to two different cultures. When I hear people talking about a multicultural church, then I'm always wondering if we're missing it somehow. Because the only culture that should be in the body of Christ is the kingdom culture. We're one culture, and that's the kingdom. So they get on a ship in Acts chapter 27, and they launch out, and it's the time of storms. Now, you know when you get on a boat and it's in the season where there's storms, that kind of stays in the back of your head. In one day, in Acts chapter 27, the ship sails from one port to another port, and when they stop in port, this man says to his centurion who's guarding him, so you need to know you're an important prisoner when a centurion guards you. A man of 1,000, he leads 1,000 leaders. He's guarding Paul. And in the Roman rule, if you lose your prisoner, you are going to die, a very terrible death. Crucifixion was not invented with Jesus. People were crucified long before Jesus. There were many crucifixions before the crucifixion of Christ. Okay, so he wasn't the only one. There were many people before and many people after. In actual fact, this same leader, Paul, was crucified upside down when he died. So it's one day and a night. Next morning, the ship arrives in the harbor, parks, they pay the parking meter, and Paul turns to the centurion, his name is Julius, and he says to him, please give me liberty to go alone to go and visit some of my friends in the city. I'll be back in time for when we leave. And his centurion says, sure. What happened in one day and one night? That a centurion can do the first thing that a leader needs to earn. Here it is, trust. If you do not gain the trust of your people, you cannot be a leader. So there's 5 C's that I want you to write here. The first C is character. Paul's character spoke for himself. He was a man of character. Second thing, C, commitment. He was a committed person. He was totally, thoroughly committed to the task. I'm flying in America, get on a plane, and they thought that part of the advertising experience in the plane is that you hear the pilot speaking to the tower. I'm wondering what's going to happen when the pawpaw hits the fans of those engines and they still keep that communication going on. Oops, the left engine isn't working, and what our reaction will be. I know I'll ask for peanuts. And just as the front wheel is about to push up, so there's the hydraulic thing that pushes the front wheel up, that forces the plane so that you get wind under the wings and you've got lift and drag, and you take off with the thrust of the power of the engine. And the pilot's words were these words: Flight ABC, tower, we are committed. And we're in the air. I was invited because I heard there's this African, and it was very interesting that the co-pilot, who was from southern states in the United States, looked at me and said, "Dr. Price, you from Africa?" I said, "Yes, I am." He says, "Why aren't you a black man?" I said, "No, I was born at daytime." "Oh," I said, "and you're a pilot." I got very scared in that moment. I said to the pilot, "You said something interesting. What does it mean?" He said, "When I said to the tower, flight committed, it means at that point, if I have to pull every energy that I have and put the brakes on, put the reverse engines on, and reverse engineer, this plane will go straight and we'll crash. We will not be able to stop. I have to take off. I've reached critical mass." That's commitment. That's why right now, 4 out of 10 marriages in South Africa, based on a talk I heard yesterday by the Department of Homeland Affairs, 4 out of 10 marriages end in divorce before year 9 in South Africa. That's nearly 50% of marriages. And they were noticing two things: that 67% of the marriages were performed at the home offices, not in a church. And the attorney who was being interviewed said, "It's an interesting thing. I'm just wondering that there's no moral or religious connotation to marriage anymore. It's just, let's contract, easy in, easy out." So how do I form trust? It's through character. Second is commitment. Third one, communication. The words that you speak and what you say as a leader. Are your words as sweet as honey? Are your words powerful and as sharp as a two-edged sword? Are your words strong? Do you mean what you say? And do you say what you mean? Stop using cliches. Here's a cliche that's overused in the church. Bless you. It sounds like you've just sneezed. Bless you, bless you. How are you? I am blessed, but you are going through troubles and problems. You are lying. I'm blessed. Give me a break. Be honest and thorough with your words and say, I'm going through some things, but God is with me. Don't say, I'm blessed. A friend of mine in the charismatic church, he believes you're not allowed to say anything negative. So he comes and visits me one day and he talks like this. He's got a cold and he's talking, he's blowing his nose. I'm going, Jeremy, sounds like you've got a bad cold. He says, no, I don't have a cold. I said, what have you got? He says, I've only got the symptoms. And does your mother know that you've just said that? Because when you've got the symptoms, you've got it. your communication. Next one, competency. The ability to show that I can do it. Competency comes with the next C, confidence. There's sometimes when a leader is absolutely nervous, but then you have to say to yourself, take a deep breath and just look the part. So when my wife Estelle calls me with that tone, those who are married, raise your hand. We know the tone, right? We become a different person. But I walk in there like looking confident. I'm still the husband of this relationship. I'll show you. Yes, dear. I missed an opportunity there for all the wives to say amen, but may they feel the guilt. So it's commitment. And it is competency. The next one is capacity. My capacity is my potential in action. If I show you an apple seed or I show you an avocado pear seed and I say, what do you see? I see a seed, you say. I'm going, no, no, no. What you should be seeing is an orchard, a forest. How many apple seeds in an apple? There's 7. Take one, hold in your hands. Here's my question. How many apples are in the seed? Millions. You need to know your capacity. Then he gets on board. They're about to take off, and the wind starts blowing. And Paul says to the captain, I don't think it's a good idea to sail. I perceive, he says, I perceive that there's going to be ill will. In other words, there's not going to be something good that's going to happen to us. He used, secondly, a very powerful competency that every leader needs to develop in the 21st century in the 4th Industrial Revolution. It is called intuition. The Christians call it being guided by the Spirit. He had an inclination, something in him, in his nephesh, in his living godlikeness, in his being, according to Genesis 2. He read a message. The universe spoke to him. God allowed him to see things. He opened his eyes and he said, I'm telling you, this is not going to be, it's not a good idea. But you'll read in Scripture that the centurion rather believed the captain and said to the captain, sail on, harvest moon. So off they go. They sail, and it's not long, a storm of note hits the boat. That moment, I'm a poet, and I pause for you to applause, but you missed it. Feel the guilt, we're moving on. It's interesting that at that time, so the other thing that I notice about Paul, when the captain says no, the next item is, I notice Paul's maturity. He's a mature leader. His ego doesn't go crazy. He doesn't go, what? Do you know who I am? Have you seen that advert where the man comes to the airline hostess at the counter and she says, no, sorry, we don't have a seat for you. She says, do you know who I am? She says, just one moment, please. She switches on the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, this is desk 519. Could someone please come here and help this gentleman because evidently he doesn't know who he is. A leader knows who he is and who she is. But the ego side of it is, ooh, if you don't call me by my title, if you don't bow before me, and if you don't do all of that, that's all ego. It's absolutely ego. We see it rampant everywhere. They have special chairs, and they've got special dishes, and they've got special this and special that all over the place, and I'm going, you know what, you're just a man. You're just a man. You burp like I do. Okay? And maturity is a process of you giving yourself permission to be and become. You're not born mature. We first are an infant, a baby, then a teenager, then a young adult, then an adult, then a parent, then a grandparent, then an elder, then a mystic. A mystic doesn't know who they are. It's a person with Alzheimer's, I think. But you do get people like that because Christ was mentored by the church fathers. He was mentored by the rabbis of rabbis. And here's just something that you need to know, because I was mentored by a rabbi. He said to me, Bill, when you sit in the presence of one of those men, you'll sit in his presence and he will not say a word for an hour. You get up and you walk out and your problem is solved. The magnificence of their presence, of their awe that they have. They also do, to qualify, what is known as the pin test. So the scroll of the Old Testament is rolled up. You roll the scroll open to everywhere you want it. You take the pin and you push a pin into one of the letters of the Hebrew alphabet, of one of the words. And you're going to say, just look at this letter. He will look at it and he will say, oh, okay. I will then tell you what is on the other side of the page where the pin is coming out. What's that word? So we need to grow and mature. The fourth thing was, this leader was aware. Another word that can be used for it was, he was consciously awake. So there are scriptures that say, awake thou that sleepest and arise from the dead. Did you know that there are people sitting in pews and in churches and in auditoriums that are alive, but they've already been buried? They just haven't had the service. Absolutely unconscious about what's happening. Unconscious about what's happening in the world. We need to watch, that's the word, be consciously awake and aware, and pray. So a leader who is aware is a leader who reads between the lines. I'm not saying nosy. There's a difference. Or a person who picks up in you. I've got one of them. He's like one of these happy. And he says, no, I'm wait one moment. I'm just reading. I'm getting a sense. I'm discerning. And then I just change the facial feature. And then he tells me, and I'm going, you far off. You know that? You're absolutely far off. Now, stop doing that with me. Just stop trying to, I don't know what you're trying, but don't do that to me. I don't enjoy it. Because as a mature person who's a Christian, we are instructed to test everything. We even have to test the sermons that come from pulpits. You don't believe everything that comes from a pulpit. You test it. Okay, we don't like to hear that as preachers. Our ego goes, oh no, because I got everything from God direct. No, there's a lot of my bias that's coming out right now. There's a lot of me that's coming out right now. A lot of stuff on the inside of me that's coming out right now. But that just makes me aware of my own humanity. That's another mark of a leader. I'm aware that I'm human. The next thing, so he speaks into situations. A leader is a person who speaks into situations. So a storm breaks loose, and it's a storm that carries on for over 14 days. A leader's voice has to be heard above the storm. You as a leader cannot afford the luxury of keeping quiet when there's a storm happening. When the Zuma storm hit our country, we noticed he said nothing. And then you had all sorts of everybody else making up stories. If your voice is not heard, other people will say something. And you've got to be careful about what you read on social media, because that's not always the truth or reality. There's disinformation that's happening on that thing that you've got to be very aware of. Not only does he speak into, he is present in the situation. A leader shows up. A leader walks the streets. A leader goes into the home. There was a pastor here in Boksburg who told my wife, he was a pastor in Potchefstroom. He goes for colon cancer operation, and he said to her, not one of his members, elders, leaders, came to visit him for the entire time that he was in that hospital. The Greek word for that is pathetic. Here shall the world know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. And love is a verb. You do it, or it's not real. Don't just say to your wife, honey, I love you. Show her. And I know wives, they don't want big things. They want small things, like a small BMW, a small mink coat, a small diamond. Amen, sisters? Let it resound. The next point I notice in the story, you read in the chapter as you read it, he became absent for a while. He separated himself a while. It's evident, even in one of the greatest leaders of the world, Christ, there were times that you read, and he separated himself. He went alone. He went there alone. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do not have that scheduled in your diary, then you're not the kind of leader that can help in a crisis, because it's in the alone times where you get the instruction. It's in the alone times where you get the inspiration. It's in the alone times where you get the direction, where your compass is realigned to magnetic north of what's really going on here. Because sometimes you cannot read the situation because you're too close to it. Step back. My wife and I have got a signal that when we're having a good fight, and at some stage when we have a marriage encounter here, we're going to teach you how to have a great fight as a husband and wife without bleeding or bruising. And we've got a sign. That's it. It says time out. We stop right here. Why? Because what I'm about to say and how I'm going to say it is going to do injustice to your dignity. And when I do that, I'm going to deaden the life of God within you, and I'm going to be a damper on the life of God within you. And that is the most disrespectful thing to do to anyone on the planet. Stop doing that with your children. Stop telling your children, you stupid, you lazy. Say, what you have done is not right. Take the attention off the person and put it on what is. Then you get perspective. Then he comes out after being separated in the middle of the storm. The storm is still raging. It's 14 days going. Comes out in the middle of the storm, and he says to them, I've heard from God, and God has given me good news and bad news. Ladies and mantelpieces, God is a God of reality. Okay? After he's separated, he now comes and he speaks out. He injects the word for the season. It's a timeous word. And he says, I've heard from God, and he's given me good news and not so good news. So the fallacy, in terms of people's worldview, there's 4 kinds of worldviews that people have. The first and the most shallow of worldviews is dualistic thinking. Only God and the devil. Then that makes me more important. So God has to be my butler, not buckler. And the devil, as I bind him and loose him. And so it's people who are always busy with the devil, always God can, and by the way, God can only be good according to who? Me. That's the lowest level of consciousness. Because God does allow suffering. He himself came down and told Moses, get out the way, paint the door lintels with blood. There's no such thing as the angel of death. I am going to come in and take the lives of the firstborn of every door that's not painted. God gives and God takes away. That's it. Don't give the devil the power to say the devil has got, because Jesus took the keys of what? Who's got the keys? If you've got the keys, you've got access. So he comes and he says, here's the good news. Not one soul on the ship, and there's 316 of us, is going to perish. That's the good news. Everybody goes, yeah, whoa, thank God. But here's the bad news. We're going to lose the ship. And then they start doing a mathematical equation. I'm on a boat in a stormy sea. Take the boat away. Where does that leave me? That's another poetic moment. So then they start lightening the ship. And what's the next thing? A leader lightens the journey for others. What did Christ say? Take my yoke upon you because my yoke is light. His theology, that's what he was talking about. My yoke is my theology, my interpretation of. That's why he was hated by the scribes and Pharisees, because he was reinterpreting what they had learned years and years and years and years. Can't eat on the Sabbath. You have to wash your hands, and him and his disciples sometimes didn't. And Jesus, with his light yoke, challenges the theology of the time of the world. He lightens the burdens. Folks, the objective of the church of Jesus Christ is not to try and keep everybody as busy as possible. They look at the 7 days of the week and they plan, we must get people here Tuesday night. We get them here Wednesday night for that, and get them there Thursday night, we must get them Friday night, and we must be here Saturday. Mustn't be with their families, and must bring their families here. And the children are bored to death in an adult presentation. But they must be here because they're under the Word and the Holy Spirit. That's how old people think. Our mission, according to this leader who wrote in one of his epistles, I thought an epistle and an apostle was husband and wife when I first got born again. But he writes in his epistle and he says, the purpose of the church is to empower the members for their ministry. The moment you come into a church and the church says, no, you here and you here for our vision. Quietly get up, wave goodbye, never come back. Because there you have domination, you have manipulation, and that's equal to witchcraft. Knock the person next to you, says he's now getting serious. So he lightens in the presence of reality. So he lightens the burdens of people. So they start throwing things overboard. Then the storm gets worse. Then somebody measures, they measure. And that's another thing that happens in storms. People measure things. How bad's it going? Oh, it's worse than yesterday. How much pain you've got now? No, I had more pain yesterday than I had today, so it's going better. And we measure outward external things. But a leader was measuring the process as it was unfolding. So they measure 15 fathoms. A little bit later, 10 fathoms. The news about that, it means where we are right now is it's getting shallower. We are going to run aground. We are going to get stuck on a bank. And then when you're stuck, you have no movement in the ship. Then the wave will break the ship. So some of the sailors, they could be members, could be leaders, they sum the situation up and they're going, you know what, we're going to jump boat now. Have you ever felt like that? I'm going to just let the lifeboat down, I'm going to save me. And so they lower a lifeboat, and they start climbing over, and Paul says to the centurion, stop those men. The promise that I have is this, 316 people will be saved. If they leave, that breaks the promise. There are so many people busy in their life and in their life dreams that are cutting things loose and jumping the ship, who, and sadly, will never reach their dream. If you want to reach the dream, you pay the full price. Excuse the pun. Some of you got it? Bless you. Folks, you need to enjoy humor. The centurion says, stop. And the two boats float away. Then Paul says, guys, I want to encourage you now. And I want to encourage you, and let's eat. The Jewish nation, as I was mentored, is the most amazing nation. They'll go, we've won the war, let's eat. We've lost the battle, let's eat. We're thinking of a battle, let's eat. Did you know that their worship in their home on a Friday night, that Jesus was every Friday night of his life as a teenager, was blessed by his father Joseph with one of the 5 to 7 fatherly blessings every single Friday night of his life. He was raised around a table of blessing. What do you do around your dinner tables? I know what happened around my dinner table. All we heard was noise of knife and fork on the plate. Pass the butter. The peas are nice. Mashed potato is soft. Meat tastes good. Thanks, Mom. Burp. Wipe mouth. Go. And I married Estelle, went into an Afrikaans family. She's got 6 brothers and sisters. And there, when they say grace, I learned, you put your hand over the plate. Because someone steals your meat or the potatoes during the blessing. I say unto thee. My first introduction by her father was he took a tea bag, put it in his tea, dipped it like this, and he just looked at me and hit me on the forehead with a hot boiling tea bag. That was my welcome into their family. Going, help me, Jesus. Then they put the sail up, and the sail of the ship takes them, and they smash into rocks. Half of the boat breaks. We're going, oh, the whole world is breaking around me. No. It's God's provision. Look at the bad things because there's always good in it. And what does Paul instruct? He says, some of you can swim, start swimming now. The rest of you who can't, God has provided a surfboard. And they had the first New Testament surfboard championship. And they held onto the wood and surfed onto the beach. Don't tell me God only works in the light. It was at night when Moses hit the sea. And the Bible reads, and in the night God sent a wind and opened up the ocean, dried its floor so they could walk across 11 miles wide. To get 3 million through that area in a short time. That's why do you think the Pharaohs followed them? In the darkest moments, Nehemiah, when do you think he investigates the city walls? It was at night. When the clouds covered the sun, when our Savior was crucified, God ripped from the top to the bottom the curtain that no man, because it was about 9 inches thick, took 14 donkeys and cattle to pull, so heavy it was. No human hand, and God tears a way open. God will tear a way open for you into His presence at any time. God works at night. In the darkest, hopeless moments, don't think He's not aware. Don't think He hasn't sent someone. They land on the beach. The leader also lands on the beach. So I need to put here is that you need to see the good in the bad. And then you need to learn to swim. Any of you can't swim? First thing on your item is on Monday, you book into swimming lessons. It's either that or surf. Then he makes a fire. And he warms. Ladies and gentlemen, a manager comes in and says, what's going wrong here? That is a thermometer. You hold the thermometer, what's the temperature? It's 42 degrees. Anybody can tell why, because the thermometer said. A leader is not a thermometer. A leader is a thermostat. A thermostat creates heat when it's needed and creates coolness when it's needed. And Paul says it's now time to warm. Why? Because it's ice cold. Your clothes are wet. You're going to get sick. And he makes provision and does very practical things. So a leader is extremely practical. You're practical. When people said to Jesus, what's this thing about the kingdom? He says, when you're practical, then you're doing the kingdom work. When you walk on your feet and go to a house and you speak to someone and you share the gospel, then you're practical. When you take a glass of water and you give me this glass of water and I am poor or in prison, then you are doing the gospel and the kingdom. When you're feeding someone. My wife and I, when we left the church, decided we need to somehow be linked to some kind of a church, somewhere along the line, our conscience. So I said to go around and look around and see where we can be a blessing in that church. Well, the first church you went to, they said, oh, yes, you can come. We want you to come and serve on the funeral committee to make sandwiches. My wife walked away there going, you know what? I've got to make sandwiches for people. They've lost their family now and that. But we're feeding live people who already got money and all of that. And then we started investigating in Boksburg. And we found there were a few schools where children are only eating once every 6th day. And Estelle and I, together with a few friends, are feeding 168 children every day out of our means. A leader finds a need and comes up with a practical solution. We could have stood at it, looked at it, prayed over it, bound it, loosed it, and those children will still not be fed. Out of the fire jumps a snake on him, a viper. What does Paul do? He simply shakes it off. The island people, so that was a bad thing, right? The island people are also bad. You read in the chapter, the island people are very bad. They're killers. And the only reason why they didn't kill them, the story says, is because of the fact that they were merciful on them because they just come from a shipwreck and they're cold and it's raining and it's wet. So they stand back. Now they watch Paul. What's going to happen? He should be frothing at the mouth and falling over and dying. He doesn't. God will use a leader's pain and healing as a miracle testimony. Don't be scared of your own things that frighten you. Don't be scared of the things that hurt you. Don't you be scared of the things that are getting to you. Shake it off. Shake it off. Not long after that, the headman of the tribe, his brother or father gets sick. Paul goes to them and he heals them. The other thing that a leader does is he brings and she brings healing. And the final thing is, he gets blessed by others. They stay on that island for 3 months. They don't have cell phones. They didn't have signal. They couldn't phone. Excuse me, we just had a shipwreck here. You bring in the helicopters and Bravo 3, come in, please. Bravo 3. A ship comes after 3 months, picks them up, and he eventually lands in Rome. But when he gets on board that ship, that island of people bless them with their provisions. Sadly, there are leaders today in churches who are doing this first. They're wanting blessing first before any of the other list. That's called ego, and that's called selfishness, and that's called immaturity, and that's called stupid. It's also called thieving. I'm a leader. We say that so quickly. I want to be a leader. We say that even quicker. But if you rate yourself on every one of these, and you rate yourself where you believe you can be, the work in the gap is where you must pay your attention. Now I close. When you go to the graveyard, you'll see gravestones, and there are dates. There's a name on them, and then there's a little something. And I've noticed that every person that's ever died is good. Isn't that amazing? Everybody's good when they die. Some children say, good, I'm glad they've died. But then they're saying the beloved and all of that. But anyway, that's a story within itself. And then they go date of birth, hyphen, date of death. You know what you and I are going to be remembered for? The hyphen, the gap. Find the gap between your scores. Work on the gap between your scores. And beloved, become who you are destined to be by working on the things that matter. You're the best group I've spoken to this morning. God bless you.